But today we do have Steve Mirer, who has given a lot of put a lot of time and effort into today's presentation. This is one of his trips of the eastern part of the world. It is Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and we're looking forward to seeing it. So thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Perfect.
In the fall of 2010, Arlene and I took a tour of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. These were places that I was fortunate not to have to visit during the Vietnam War, courtesy of the US Army. The first stop in Vietnam was Ho Chi Minh City, formerly known as Saigon, prior to the communist takeover of South Vietnam in 1975. The city's core had wide, elegant boulevards and historic French colonial buildings, but most of the buildings we saw were a lot less grand. There were some high-rise apartment buildings, but most were narrow, several-story apartments above colorful shops selling food and clothing. The sidewalks were full of people and the streets were clogged with scooters. There were no traffic lights, and in order to cross the street, you needed to walk across the street at a steady pace and hope that the scooters would navigate around you. It took a certain amount of faith to get across the street, and once we had to tip a man to help us across. The sidewalks had outdoor food vendors and restaurants, and the streets had bicycle cart food vendors and bicycle rickshaws for transportation. So this is Ho Chi Minh City in 2010. And you can see pretty prosperous relative to how it was during the war. A lot of activities going on out on the street. People would be eating on the streets and vendors selling food there. Those are rickshaws. Outdoor markets. Food vendors. Our first day of sightseeing began with a visit to the Theanhau Temple, a Chinese-style temple of the Chinese sea goddess Mazu. Mazuism adopted elements of Taoism and Buddhism and was practiced by Chinese people living in Vietnam. Inside the temple, we saw worshippers burning incense sticks. This was followed by walking around the streets, bustling with people going about their daily routine and visiting the markets with a colorful display of merchandise. We next visited and toured the Unification Palace, which was the home and workplace of the president of South Vietnam during the Vietnam War. It was also the site where the war ended when a North Vietnamese tank crashed through its gates in April of 1975. So this is the Reunification Palace. View of Ho Chi Minh City. These are some of the ubiquitous motor scooters. That's actually not a lake back here. It's a painting on the side of the front of a storefront. It's the food vendor. Schoolgirls. The following day, we journeyed to the tunnels of Cu Chi, located in the district of Ho Chi Minh City. These were an immense network of connecting underground tunnels part of a much larger network of tunnels that underlay much of the country. The tunnels were the location of several military campaigns during the Vietnam War and were the Viet Cong's base of operations for the Tet Offensive in 1968. The tunnels were used by Viet Cong soldiers as hiding spots during combat, as well as serving as communication and supply routes, hospitals, food and weapon caches, and living quarters for numerous North Vietnamese fighters, and actually for their families as well. So this is one of the entrances to the tunnel. That's me standing in the tunnel. I can't imagine anybody actually crawling in there, but thousands of Viet Cong people did. This is a more civilized entrance to the tunnels, but still very claustrophobic. This is me, this is Arlene, and these are two ladies we were traveling with, and these are not real people, but these are representations of Viet Cong soldiers. And this is an actual woman demonstrating the cooking that was done during the tunnels. And the tunnels were right in between the American military bases. So the Viet Cong virtually lived under the American military bases. On the way to our next attraction, we passed a colorful funeral procession escorted by a large number of uniformed attendants. The Naga Temple, or Jade Emperor Pagoda, was a Taoist pagoda built by the Chinese community. There we saw a prayer service being conducted and people lighting incense sticks. The pagoda housed numerous statues and delicate wood carvings with intricate tiles on the roof. So this is the funeral procession. I might have been stuck and they were pushing. This is some of the housing in Ho Chi Minh City. This is the temple. This is outside the temple. These are people begging. The next site was the War Remnants Museum, a war museum containing exhibits relating to the Vietnam War and the First Indochina War involving the French colonialists. The museum comprised a series of themed rooms in several buildings with period military equipment placed within a walled yard. Other exhibits included graphic photography covering the effects of Agent Orange and other chemical defoliant sprays, the use of napalm and phosphorus bombs, and war atrocities such as the My Lai massacre. With all these reasons to hate Americans, it was surprising that we were treated as well by the Vietnamese, although a good percentage of the population was born after the war ended. We finished the day by attending a water puppet show. So this is outside the War Remnants Museum. That's a captured US fighter plane. And this is the water puppet show. Our last day in Ho Chi Minh City began with a visit to the Vientiane Buddhist temple located near the city of Mai Thao in the Mekong Delta region. The garden of the temple was decorated with many potted plants and fruit trees. The city of Mai Thao was the capital of its province and its economic, education, and technology center. There we boarded a boat for a trip on the Mekong Delta and saw floating markets where people sold and bought things on the river. We also saw ramshackle buildings with television antennas built on stilts at the water's edge, many small fishing boats, boats transporting goods, fish farms, and even a water buffalo swimming in the river. We cruised up a narrow tributary and stopped at a handicraft village where villagers made coconut candy and souvenirs out of the empty coconut shells. So this is the Vientiane Pagoda. This is Mai Thao. And this is sites we saw cruising on the Mekong River. That looks like the boat in the African Queen with Humphrey Bogart. This is the handicraft village. These are coconut husks that they were making souvenirs out of. There's my water buffalo. That's fishermen. Now we're back in Ho Chi Minh City. The next stop was the People's Committee building, located at the end of one of the most beautiful streets in the city. The building was built and put into use in 1909 as a hotel, whose original name was Hotel de Ville, and was designed by Gardis, a famous French architect. This building was one of the oldest, biggest, and most beautiful French-style buildings in Ho Chi Minh City. We also saw the Central Post Office, which was constructed when Vietnam was part of French Indochina in the late 19th century. The last visit of the day was to Notre Dame Cathedral, with 2 bell towers established by French colonialists who completed construction in 1880. We had American breakfast in our hotel and ate our other meals in restaurants serving typical Vietnamese dishes such as pho or rice vermicelli. This completed our tour of Ho Chi Minh City, and the next day we flew to Hanoi. So this is the People's Committee building, post office, Notre Dame, police officers or traffic officers. This is a billboard. Street sweeper. Our stay in Hanoi began with a visit to the Ho Lo prison, facetiously named the Hanoi Hilton by American pilots captured during the Vietnam War. It was built by the French colonialists to house political prisoners and then used by the North Vietnamese army to house, torture, and interrogate captured servicemen, mostly American pilots shot down during bombing raids. The prison was demolished during the 1990s, although the gatehouse remained as a museum, where we saw the flight suit that John McCain wore when he was shot down and captured. Next stop was the National Museum of Vietnamese History, which was built by the French as an archaeological research institution during the early 20th century. There we saw exhibits with items from prehistory up to the 1947 revolution and the founding of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Nearby was the Hanoi Opera House, also erected by the French colonial administration during the same time period. This is the famous Hanoi Hilton. And this is Hanoi Museum. the Opera House. The next day, we drove to Halong Bay, passing rice farmers working in the fields, to take a day cruise on the bay. The bay consisted of a dense cluster of some 1,600 limestone monolithic islands, topped with thick jungle vegetation, rising spectacularly from the ocean. Several of the items were hollow with enormous caves. A community of around 1,600 people lived on the bay in 4 fishing villages on floating houses and was sustained through fishing and marine aquaculture. During our cruise, we saw vendors selling food and vegetables from small boats, fishing boats, fish farms, and barges transporting shipping containers. We also had views of tiny islands with their rock arches, sheer cliffs, white sand beaches, and peaceful coves. The next day, we flew to Laos. This is rice farmers. This is Halong Bay. This is a woman trying to sell us fruits. I think that's a fish farm. Our journey to Laos from Vietnam began with a flight to Luang Prabang with its well-preserved architectural, religious, and cultural heritage, a blend of the rural and urban developments over several centuries. The city had many Buddhist temples and monasteries, and every morning, hundreds of monks from the various monasteries walked through the streets collecting alms. We started our visit at the former royal palace, which became a museum when the monarchy was overthrown by the communists, and the royal family was taken to re-education camps. In the palace compound, there were several buildings, including the royal barge shelter, a conference hall, and the Ho Chi Temple that housed the standing Buddha statue called Prabang. So this is Laos. We left Vietnam, now we're in Laos. This is where we started in Luang Prabang. And this is some of the monks. That's the Royal Palace Museum. That's the Buddhist Hall. We next journeyed to the nearby Wat Mai, the largest and most richly decorated Buddhist temple in the city, which was used by the Laotian royalty prior to their ouster. Both its interior and exterior were extensively adorned with black and red lacquer decoration and gold leaf. The next Buddhist temple that we visited was Wat Sen, literally the temple of 100,000 treasures, which was constructed in the early 18th century with 100,000 stones from the Mekong River. The temple was restored in 1957, commemorating the Buddha's 2500th birthday. From there, we ventured to Wat Giang, a Buddhist temple which contained over 20 structures on the grounds, including an ordination hall, shrines, pavilions, residencies, and gardens. This is Wat Mai. Wat Sen, Wat Giang. This is the night market in Luang Prabang. This is an overview of the night market. This is the ballet we attended. Next morning was an early wake up to see the procession of Buddhist monks and novices dressed in their saffron-colored robes and barefoot, walking through the streets to collect alms. Vendors sold food items to give to the monks. People sat or knelt on the sidewalk and gave food to the passing monks who collected the items in urns. There was also a procession of small children armed with baskets paralleling the monks' procession to collect handouts from the monks. Following breakfast, we took a boat trip on the muddy Mekong River to Hanoi Village, passing several communities and fishing boats on the way. So this is the monk procession. And people lined up kneeling on the sidewalk, passing out alms. There's a kid ready to collect some of his own. This is our trip along the Mekong River. This is the village we visited. All of these items were for sale. Our boat journey continued with a stop at the Pacquiao Caves, which consisted of the Tham Ting, the lower cave, and the Tham Thung, upper cave, overlooking the west side of the Mekong River. The caves were noted for their miniature Buddha sculptures. We returned to Luang Prabang by boat before setting off for the Kawangsi Falls, a three-tier waterfall beginning in shallow pools atop a steep hillside. These led to the main fall with a 200-foot cascade and were accessed by a trail to the left of the falls. This is some of the miniature Buddhas. This is the falls. It's a bear. And some of the monks were visiting the falls. Next up was a Hmong village consisting of small wooden houses with thatched roofs, but they did not have electricity. The Hmong were poor mountain people who were not beloved by their countrymen because they helped the American CIA during the Vietnam War. They were not Buddhists like most Laotians and had their own ancestor and spirit worship religion, which often made them targets of persecution. This is the village. We began the next day by walking the streets of Luang Prabang and observing the vibrant street activity of people going about their daily routine. We then visited Wat Visun, the oldest temple in Luang Prabang, and once the home of the Prabang Buddha statue. The temple had a collection of religious artifacts and precious items and a number of richly gilded Buddhas. Its stupa was in the shape of a lotus flower. We didn't try to ride the elephant. This is their version of sculling teams. Minibus. Here you could buy pizza. This is a school courtyard or a schoolyard. This is the Wat Visun. The following day began with a visit to the Ho Pacquiao, a former temple, which was a museum of religious art and a small shop. A number of Buddhas were located on the terrace, including stone Buddhas dating from the 6th to 9th century. From there, we traveled to the Wat Zazakat Museum, famous for its cloister wall, housing thousands of tiny Buddha images and rows with hundreds of seated Buddhas. These images dated from the 16th through the 19th century and came in all sizes. I skipped the part. This is where we journeyed to Vientiane, the capital and largest city in Laos, on the banks of the Mekong River. This was more of a real city as we saw cars and motorcycles on the streets in addition to bicycle rickshaws. These are some monks doing their shopping. And again, food markets. Okay, now these are the temples that we visited. This is a museum at one of the temples. Of course, all the museums and temples had Buddhas. The next visit was to the Pha That Luang, a gold-covered large Buddhist stupa in the center of the city. It was regarded as a national symbol and was the most sacred monument in the country. From the outside, That Luang looked more like a fortress surrounded by high walls, featuring two temples with the main stupa, the top of which was covered with gold leaf. Outside, there were vendors selling birds in cages. The rest of the day was spent walking around Vientiane and enjoying the colorful markets selling produce and prepared food, the shops, the pretty flowers and trees lining the streets. The following day, we flew to Cambodia. This is the Pha That Luang stupa. This is the actual stupa. The other buildings were around it. And the stupa is back here. There's the bird lady. Siem Reap in Cambodia was the gateway to the Angkor region. The town was a cluster of small villages along the Siem Reap River. As we drove around in a Jeep near the Siem River bank, we saw the effects of the river flooding. People were wading and riding bikes through shin-high water, and small children were swimming in the streets. Houses with thatched roofs and woven side walls were flooded, and laundry and fish were drying on racks. So this is Cambodia. This is where we started out in Siem Reap. And you can see the Mekong River runs through all three countries, out into the Mekong Delta and into the South China Sea. So this is the flooding that we had to drive through. It's a young man swimming. There's fish drying on racks. We then drove to Tonle Sap Lake, where we took a boat trip on the Tonle Sap River to visit a floating village which consisted of several dozen primitive wooden houses floating on the river. The village moved along the river according to the seasons, and even to Tonle Sap Lake during the dry season. We also passed stilt houses along the riverbank and were approached by small boats with children with snakes around their necks begging. Boats with women also begged or attempted to sell food items to passengers on the tour boat. We made a stop at a floating souvenir shop, which was also a crocodile farm, but we passed on the opportunity to buy one. So this is a part of the floating village. These are the crocodiles for sale. I'm not sure what that sign meant, but there's a kid with a snake around his neck. The next stop was the Sandstone Beckham Temple. The shape of the temple was a 5-level pyramid reflecting the Temple Mountain scheme, an architectural representation of Mount Meru, home of the Hindu gods in mythology. The site of the Kang temple consisted of 3 concentric enclosures separated by 2 moats. Again, because of the rain, it was difficult to appreciate the beauty. So this is it. And it's hard to take good pictures in the rain, especially holding the umbrella with one hand. The next day brought visits to more sites, starting with Angkor Thom, the last and most enduring capital city of the Khmer Empire. The rain had stopped and we had some picturesque views of the city reflected in its surrounding moat, and were able to appreciate the intricate carvings on the temples. It was built as a fortified city, enclosing residences for priests and palace and military officials, and included buildings for administering the kingdom. Inside the city walls were the Bayon and Bayon temples, among others. This is Angkor Thom, and you can see people with umbrellas. You can see some reconstruction going on, but in general, these places were not well preserved. From there, we traveled to Angkor Wat, a temple complex originally constructed as a Hindu temple dedicated to the god Vishnu rather than Shiva, and then transformed into a Buddhist temple towards the ends of the 12th century. It was a unique combination of Khmer standard design for state temples and a later plan of concentric galleries. This is Angkor Wat. We then moved on to Ta Prohm, another temple at Angkor, located in close proximity to the others. It was founded as a Mahayana Buddhist monastery and university. 5 rectangular enclosing walls surrounded a central sanctuary. Tapram was a temple of towers, closed courtyards, and narrow corridors. Bas reliefs on bulging walls were carpeted with lichen, moss, and creeping plants, and shrubs sprouted from the roof of monumental porches. Trees, hundreds of years old, towered overhead, their leaves filtering the sunlight and casting a greenish pall over the whole scene. The temple was used as a location in the film Tomb Raider. As you can see, all these places are overgrown by tree roots. I think that's a banyan tree. After lunch, we returned to Bayon, which was built as a Buddhist temple and indicated a change from Hinduism to Mahayana Buddhism. It was located in the center of Angkor Thom, and its basic structure was comprised of 3 levels, which corresponded to 3 distinct phases of building. The famous carvings on the outer wall of the first level depicted vivid scenes of everyday life in 12th century Cambodia. Bayon's 54 Gothic towers were decorated with 216 gargantuan smiling faces of, I can't pronounce it, an enlightened being who was destined to become a Buddha, but postponed that final state in order to help humanity. This is the Bayon Temple. Not too welcoming. You see the same face throughout all the structures. I guess that's a representation of Buddha. For our last day in Cambodia, we drove to the capital city of Phnom Penh, situated at a confluence of the Mekong, Basik, and Tanak Sap rivers. The city had a provincial charm and tranquility with French colonial mansions and tree-lined boulevards amid monumental Angkorian architecture. There were several marketplaces selling carvings, paintings, silver, silk, gems, and antiques. We began with a visit to the National Museum, which was Cambodia's largest museum of cultural history and leading historical and archaeological museum. The museum was housed in a graceful terracotta structure of traditional design, completed in 1920, with an inviting courtyard garden. It contained one of the world's largest collections of Khmer art, including sculptural, ceramics, bronzes, and ethnographic objects. Well, this is Siem Reap. We didn't go to the Funky Monkey. National Museum. From there, we moved to the nearby Royal Palace, a complex of buildings which serves as the royal residence of the King of Cambodia. The kings of Cambodia have occupied it since it was built in the 1860s, except when the country came into turmoil during the reign of the Khmer Rouge. The complex was divided by walls into 4 main compounds. The palace had various gardens with tropical flowers and plants, and we were able to wander around the Silver Pagoda compound and the central compound containing the throne room and the Shang Shaya Pavilion. This is the National Museum. The next stop was the Tual Slang Genocide Museum, a former high school, which was used as a notorious security prison 21 by the Khmer Rouge regime from its rise to power in 1975 till its fall in 1979. Tual Slang was just one of at least 150 execution centers established by the Khmer Rouge, who were Cambodian communists. We toured the site and saw photos of thousands of prisoners hanging on the walls, the tiny cells which held the prisoners and shells of skulls of former inmates. Out of an estimated 17,000 people imprisoned at Tual Slang, there were only 7 known survivors who were kept alive because of their useful skills. We met one of them, Bo Meng, an artist whose wife was killed in the prison, who was selling copies of his memoirs. So this is the Genocide Museum. This is Bo Meng, the former prisoner. He was autographing copies of his memoirs. From there, we proceeded to the Shuang Ek killing field, one of a number of sites in Cambodia with collectively more than 1 million people were killed and buried by the Khmer Rouge regime during its rule of the country. The mass killings were regarded as part of a broad state-sponsored genocide. The memorial park at Shuang Ek was built around the mass graves of many thousands of victims, most of whom were executed after interrogation at the S-21 prison. There was a commemorative stupa filled with the skulls of some of the victims, a haunting reminder of what had taken place in the surrounding fields. Then it was back to Phnom Penh and our return home the next day. We have acres of these killing fields with signs about not walking on them. And this is the display of skulls of victims. And back to the capital. Okay, that's it.
That's great. First of all, thank you very much. And
my pleasure.
Question that came up when you were showing the, I think you called them the floating villages.
Yeah.
Do they live there all year round?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Is the name of that, is there a name to that village? I know you wrote, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. Sap Lake.
Yeah. I'm looking. It's Tiny Sap, I think.
Yeah. Is that the name of the village?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, did you feel safe there the whole time in all of those places?
Yes, very safe. For some reason, nobody was mad at Americans, so we were good.
That's funny.
And in Vietnam, the young guide that took us around, he was just looking to get sponsored to come to the US to pursue a career.
So he wanted you to adopt him?
Yeah. We declined, but I think he was working on another sponsor. But the poor guy, he had to bicycle to pick us up 2 hours each way on his bike early in the morning to pick us up, and then after we were done to go home to live with his family.
Wow. Anyone have any questions for Steve?